Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for staying, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you all. As Kenny said, this is kind of always a welcoming thing for me to come back and do a talk at the OMA, being one of the founding signatures on the contract that formed it. Interesting how they put some of the panel together today and the speakers this afternoon, because I'm going to fundamentally disagree in some ways and also applaud in other ways some of the comments from the last speaker. And I'm also going to be talking about some numbers and things for you. So I'm going to mix the two things together as we go. Okay? And okay, there we go, good. All right, so really the context of this is derived from a presentation that I gave to the GS1 CEO Summit about a year and a half ago, and we've updated it since then because the numbers have become even more pronounced. And overall, the summary after 20 minutes of me showing them numbers and statistics and usage and apps and all this stuff was more people are scanning codes on physical packaged goods than people through the logistics and supply chain and purchase process. And therefore, it is a channel of communication that was not being ever considered, that is something that is now taking over how consumers are interacting with a particular product from a particular brand. And that was just like this light bulb went off of, oh my God, we actually have this communication channel that's significant. Where did this come from, and how come we're moving from where that was to where it is today, which is a significant move? Well, it's really fundamentally about smartphones. Now, we've talked about this audience. I'm certainly not going to educate on smartphones, but the whole idea of adding a new capability to a device after it's shipped is an interesting capability that has changed everything, right? Because now you buy it, and if it has the physical sensor in it, I can do something interesting with that sensor, even if it wasn't contemplated at the time the device was built. That is the fundamental reason why this is taking off. It allows innovation and creativity post the manufacturing process of the device. This is so much so that what we're seeing right now, and these are numbers, I've given you the sources on all of this stuff as I go through it, so it's not just Mike's opinion, which I happily share with you and anybody else who will listen anyway. So 79% of smartphone owners are what we consider smartphone shoppers. What this means is that they are doing in-store research. So you'll see people in a store, they pick up a product, and they say, I want to know more about it. I don't trust the person who's going to potentially come up and help me maybe in half an hour when they get time or care enough to come and talk to me. So I want research myself. They take their phone out and they scan it and they want some information. Who's in control of that information? How accurate is that information? Just because it's something that can be found by Google doesn't necessarily mean it's correct, right? So what we need to do is figure out where is that data coming from to allow that consumer to make an informed decision about what to buy. So that's really where we get into this in-store research, is also not only an enormous channel and opportunity for commercial benefit, but it is also something that has tremendous liability and risk if it's not leveraged the proper way. 45% of all consumers using smartphones for in-store product research and or browsing. So this is a staggeringly high number. And when you think about this, it's saying that you're approaching half of the people who are buying something in a retail store are doing some level of offline research about it that you're not in direct control over if you are the store owner or if you are the brand. So how do you get some control over that to try and give something other than the thing which we all, I think, must realize at the end of the day, the thing that pays for us all to be able to be in this room is the commercial operations of our companies. So if the only thing that these codes are used to do is to drive the price to zero so that someone can drive around the block, we don't get to go to Dublin anymore, okay? Or anywhere else. So there is a cost of free that we need to put in there that most people just think, oh, I used it, it's free. No, actually, you took a ton of value out of the system that is necessary to keep innovating. So let's just consider that as a backdrop to some of these comments. 54% of shoppers here are also asking for more information about it, and they've expressed a desire for even more information than they can get today. So we do these kinds of surveys on a pretty regular basis, but you can see this is validated by other people. Now, 37% of the people are using it for in-store price comparison, and that is a scary number, okay? So what do we do about the whole idea that the objective of using these codes is not to disintermediate the physical store. This is the whole showrooming concept that's a big, big problem and putting many resellers out of business. Now, we've got ways of using those codes that have a commercial service behind them, because there's tons of work and effort to get the data necessary to provision out these answers that help the retailer to not only circumvent the showrooming problem, but to actually reverse it. All right, so that you can put the retailer in a position where they can give information that is brand specific, that is retailer benefit oriented, and tells a story that is broader than, if you drive 3 miles, I can save you 4 cents. Okay? And those are things that really do matter. So we have to do something about this trend of 40% of the people looking for the cheapest price. That doesn't mean we should come up with ways to price gouge people, but it means that we need to have a more balanced message, because as every large company that is successful in selling, let's call it sugar water, not to be too pejorative about it, they don't want to hear about their margins eroding further, right? There is value to brand, okay? And that is what we have to do for the other product classes as well. 80% of smartphone owners want more mobile-optimized product information while shopping in stores. So what is this information? What are they searching for that isn't on the package already? It's a common question I get. There's a product label and it has all the ingredient information. What they're looking for is, I have a nut allergy. How do I know that this product is absolutely free of any nut dust whatsoever? How do I find out if there's some drug interaction between this particular over-the-counter medicine and this other stuff that I'm taking? That can't fit on that package. So what happens is, if you put a code on that package, you can now link to a ton of other information. Now, could you put it all in the code? Yes, you could, but then you'd have to have a fold-out origami kind of code. Or you could use, let's see, a service provider who actually allows for all of that information to be delivered and updated and maintained and current and so forth, and you could alter those messages as new content becomes available, or as you want to add more of this information to help that customer out. So the idea here is that you can't just say that the label itself is enough. What we're really talking about is the extension of the label. Pictorially, what people are looking for is the Tell Me More button on every package in the world. Can I push the Tell Me More button and learn lots more about this product? That's what we're trying to enable via the code programs, and that's what these people are expressing a desire and interest to have. Let's give you some hard numbers. May 2013, best month ever in our history, okay? So 7.3 million codes were scanned in May alone. Now this is a rather startling number. You saw some numbers, 10,000, 50,000 kinds of numbers. We have code campaigns that have had millions of scans off of the same QR code. Now, 7.5 million in a single month is a great, great month. It is also indicative of a trend, and that is that every single month is always the best month. So that part's really nice. What we should think about in this one, though, is even though that's a nice number, it's still a long way to go. If you take a look at the number of smartphones that are out there, if you take a look at the number of camera phones which have this inherent capability to do this, it's still a small fraction. What's interesting, though, is everybody who's doing this is getting a ton of information about them, known by the reseller, known by the brand, to be able to better target and serve that customer. So it is an important group that is growing every month that should not be ignored. Okay. Another thing that's on here is this is only us. Right, best case, Scanbuy represents 7 to 8% of the total scans on the planet. Okay, now, we are the largest individual commercial supplier, but it's still the minor fraction. Okay, so if you do the math on this and you see what the total market size is of people who are scanning, if you extrapolate that out, it is an even more significant percentage. Rich data is big data. We can get into all the philosophical discussions about this, but at the end of the day, here's what it boils down to. Every time someone scans something, I get about a minimum of 30 and a maximum this week of about 40 data points about them. Okay? Let's just kind of put that into perspective. I get to know the phone you have, the operator you're on, where you are, the OS, the version of the software that's on it, everything that you've scanned in the last 30 days, everything that you've browsed, on and on and on and on and on. Right? Unless you know how to clamp those things down. So the people in this room know how to clamp that down, but that's about it. Okay? So everybody else, we build this rich profile up that allows us to either do good or do evil. In our particular case, we're doing good with it. Right? Now, we do have to be careful, right? There is PII implications, there is misuse of data implications, there is have you disclose to the end user in a reasonable fashion that someone with an IQ of 100 can actually follow it. So there's all of those things we have to do also. However, when you think about the aggregation of all of that information and then the publicly sourced information that you can get, you end up with this rich data, big data kind of idea. You can use data to confuse anybody and come up with any conclusion you want. We all know how to do it. We all talk to the analysts. The important thing here is what is something that is meaningful? What is something that actually has some statistical value that you can do something with as opposed to tell cute anecdotes, okay? And that's really where you're looking for how do you take all of this feed of data, right? All of those scans that I just talked about in May, times 40, right? That's an awful lot of data that we have to crunch, and that's just us. When we start to look at all the other data sources that we can put into it, we ourselves have a big data problem that we're wrestling with. When you look at that industry-wide, it's a bigger problem, okay? So looking for what is significant, what is not significant based on the input question that comes into you is a really hard problem. And that's what we're trying to stress with as we start to look at how much data can we collect, is you can draw wrong conclusions from it. So don't believe every piece of data that you say just because, as Tim pointed over lunch, someone said they got it using big data techniques. That doesn't make it right, okay? Just like searching for it on Google doesn't make it right. Enhanced services, however, are what it enables. So I thought Transmit a great example. We do this today, but we have a dynamic capability that's layered onto it, where you can use a QR code plus look at the default language of a device and give people the right language. You can also do other things. If I know that they're under 18 or over 21, I can give different messaging than if they're not. If they happen to have scanned a like product to this, I can do something different than if this is the first time scanning that product. If they're a member of that store's loyalty program, I can give them one message as opposed to another message. Or any concatenation of any of those 40 pieces of metadata that I collect. I challenge anybody to do that with a free code, by the way. If you go to any of the CMO forums, and you talk to any of the higher-end CMOs, any of the big brands, the thing that they're all talking about is relevance and contextual, okay? How do we know that the information that we can deliver to somebody based on their scanning behavior, whether that's an NFC tag or QR code, I really don't care. But if I aggregate all of that, can I use that information to allow that CMO to reach out to that person and give them a contextually relevant message that's for them? So it's not just simply referring them to a URL. All right, that doesn't do anybody any good. Even if it is mobilized, even if it follows every best practice and standard out there, it may not be what that particular person wants because it doesn't allow for individual modification. Okay? However, when you start using mechanisms where that metadata is used to alter what that result is in real time as those results are delivered, now you start to do some really cool things. Now I can be contextual. Again, can't do this with a free code, but you can do this if you got someone behind it that's processing all of those things and then altering what it means, okay? So your canonical example of this one would be something, just to make it really concrete, you walk into a coffee shop, you scan a bag of coffee, and it says, oh, wait a minute, it's before noon and you've not shopped or scanned anything in this store before. I'll push you a digital coupon that says if you buy a cup of coffee with that bag of coffee, I'll give you 50 cents off. However, if it's after lunch, I know the pastries are starting to stack up, so I'm going to give you an offer instead that says 50 cents off on a slice of pie. Okay, so imagine one QR code that can have 6 different variable answers based on that, and that takes you less than a minute to set up. Okay, that's what we're talking about contextual, and you can layer this in and get more and more complicated as your marketing department can really come up with the ideas you want to do. So why is it that we only have this few millions of customers a month who are scanning? What is it that an industry standards body could do to help us try and get this to be a bigger marketplace? I'm going to break this into some 2D kinds of things and some 1D kinds of things, but overall there's a meta message, which is anything that allows you to get to scale, because different approaches are causing fragmentation. There's cost in that, there's complexity in that, so therefore there's commercial opportunity in it. If all of the complexity is taken out of business, if all of the complexity is taken out of market to market, if all the complexity is taken out of language and regulatory differences and all of those things, then there's not much value in providing that service anymore, okay, which means price goes down nearly to zero. So we end up with the free discussion again. So the question really is here, how do we come up with ways of taking the things that can be solved, that reasonably can be addressed within a standards organization, and still allow for and catalyze commercial opportunity for all the companies that we work for, okay? The idea here is I broke it into three different pieces: innovation, collaboration, and development. Okay, I'm going to cover each one in detail. I put this slide together to kind of summarize it, but in the interest of time and to get you to some examples at the end, I'll move forward here. So on the innovation side, what if, for example, when you turned on your cell phone and you brought up the camera, today you can turn your flash on and off, you can set your white balance. What if there was a button on there that looked like a little scanner, that you could just touch it, and now every camera phone could inherently scan? That would be cool, right? Now you'd get everybody, you don't have to download an app anymore, it just simply does it. Now that doesn't mean I'm taking my 65 million copies of apps that people have downloaded and installed and saying I don't care about that, because I really do. So do my investors, so do the people who use it. But what I am saying is that I can add value above the fundamental capability to scan. Because Terrence was right, there's a lot of things that a scanner can do, but there's also many more junky scanners out there than there are good ones. All right, you've got us, you got Neomedia, you got Enigma, and you got 4 or 5 others that are really good, and every other one runs into these problems that he was talking about. Put it on a round thing, their scanner can't read it. The top tier ones all can. We've solved that problem in the app. But if we want to just take it and say at an industry level, let's just get at least a good quality scanner so the 100 new ones that come out every day don't ever make it to market, that's fine. Okay, now we got one good quality base point. Now we can layer on top of that, and that's particularly cool. From a collaboration standpoint, understand that it's not only the groups in this room. OMA has done a fantastic job since its founding days of trying to bring in the entire ecosystem involved in it. There are some other people this time who get involved in this one. For example, the brands. Right? Brands generally don't come to OMA meetings. Why? Well, for lots of reasons, but if you're going to do something in a standard that's going to impact their ability to communicate their message to their consumer, they're going to have something to say about that. Okay, so it's probably a good idea to co-opt them and bring them into it if you're going to try and step to that kind of level. If not, then it's certainly a collaboration that ought to go and reach out to GS1, for example, to talk to their brand members to figure out what exactly do they want to have on a can, what do they not? What do they want to have on a pharmaceutical, and what do they not? Right? There's legal liability here now that it's known that 4 million people in the first quarter of 2013, just with our app, scanned a UPC code from some CPG-related product. That's a lot of people who know this interacts badly with this drug, therefore don't do it. So if you don't put that information, there's actually liability because you now know it's a viable, broad-based communication channel. If the brand doesn't include it, what happens? They could get sued for that, depending on what country you're in. So we have to understand that there's a reach out here. If we enable something, that we better make sure that the other parts of the ecosystem that we don't normally talk to are looped in and involved in it, or we have to rely on the commercial interests of those of us who are still innovating on it to continue to keep those relationships open, or we get ourselves in a big, big problem. Next is on the development. There are good practices. Terrence brought up a couple of them. I thought they were great, right? We actually have a book called The Wall of Shame, right? And it's the examples of the unbelievably stupid and the good intended but awfully executed kinds of campaigns that just break. So I'm going to hit this from a slightly different lens as we go through it, but I'll give you my most favorite story right now. Working with a large automotive component manufacturer. They were priding themselves on how technologically innovative they were. And they wanted to do a sparse ad on the back cover of Popular Mechanics for worldwide distribution. And the overall call to action was, we're so cool, real sparse ad, QR code on it that linked to a whole great set of experiences, lots of stuff that we were doing that's got nothing to do with what's in the code. It has to do with what derives after you process that code. So it was all really cool stuff. Thought the deal was done, ended up, it showed up in print. We were like, how'd this happen? We scanned it and we got a 404 file not found error. $400,000 worth of placement fees went to Popular Mechanics for that, and it was worth nothing. Now, if it was a free code, there's really nothing you can do about that. If, however, it were a paid code, now you actually would have taken about 1.5 seconds to update what the URL was because the person forgot the second slash after HTTP. That was the error, a simple typo. Okay, so I don't know, you could look at free, you could look at $500,000, I don't know, you guys figure out what free costs. Anyway, let me get to a couple case studies here on stuff that we think is particularly cool, that is using codes in a really interesting way, that have generated some massive kinds of results. Is anybody from Pepsi or Coke in the room? Okay. In Spain, 70 million cans and bottles of Pepsi now are going out with the Biddy logo, which is ScanLife's name in Spain. Okay. Now, this is intended for 1D product information. Coke also has the Biddy logo on every single can of Coke that goes out. I'd like anybody to raise their hands. Has anybody seen Coke and Pepsi both choose the same vendor to do a similar thing before? Okay. GS1. Very well done. I knew there had to be something like that. Okay. So in any event, what we're saying here is that, look, there are ways that you can get large adoption, huge brands to do things that they normally wouldn't have done because we're giving them control of what that content is. Right, so they're in control of the database. We host it, we manage it, we provision it, we do the apps, and all of that stuff to make that go. And it was heavy lifting for 2.5 years to actually build this business. So lots and lots of investment. Would it have been easier if there were some standards to make that possible? Yes, it would have been easier. Would it have been better economically if we simply had 100 people who were all enabled at the same time to make this completely valueless? No, that wouldn't have been great. So it's really a question of how do we take down the things that took 2.5 years for a company to do it and make it so we could do it in 6 months. But it still needs effort to make it unique and innovative on top of the basics. And that's what this program is about. It isn't just a replacement for the product ingredient logo. It's much, much more than that. Coke, thank you for using this example. It's one of ours. This was, by the way, a paid-for code. Just trying to bring that up. Okay. What this one did is particularly cool, and why Coke was so excited about this. This was done in relation to their Euro Cup sponsorship. If you scanned the code the first time, it kept track of how many times you scanned the code. So it gave you a video of what was coming up in next week's game. If you scanned it a second time, it would say, wait a minute, you've scanned it before. I'm not going to give you the same video again. I'll give you a highlight reel from last week's game. If you scanned it a third time, it gave you a third video that was a different kind of spin on it. So now you have one code that depends on who scans it and how often they scanned it, does completely different things. Now, in terms of the numbers on this thing, this was millions of scans. I can't give you the exact number, but it was millions of scans on this. And Coke continues to do this with other brands with us as well. Some of the reason why they're doing it is they don't want Pepsi to be able to put a plus sign after the code and find out how many scans they got. Okay, they really would prefer that that remain proprietary information they view it as trade secret. Another good reason why some of these shorteners, unless you want to just publish all of your information about how your marketing programs are doing, you may want to consider using a vendor to do something like that. Okay. This one I just had to put in because it got an enormous number of scans and it had nothing to do with how pretty the QR code was. Right? So this was the Gillette ad that came out. It was fantastically well received. We got a ton of scans from this one. And it was fundamentally about an enticing way, at least for the male readers, to understand what the value and efficacy of that particular product set was. Lots and lots of scans generated from that, and there's follow-on campaigns that are already planned. So this is really a story here that we're painting of people are doing much more creative things nowadays rather than just pointing to the homepage of their website. There is an opportunity to educate a lot of folks about how to use codes in a way that's going to give them results like these 3 campaigns that I just picked out, but I could have given you hundreds. The important thing is, how do we make sure that these millions of consumers, when they scan a mobile barcode that's there, that they're going to get a good experience? What are some of the best practices that could be instantiated through work of a standards and trade association to try and help that education process out. There's a market outreach about this. There's a general education about, I'll give you another example. It isn't just the code placement, and it isn't necessarily about someone hijacking the way that it was shown, but we can also take a look at it and say somebody actually took a QR code that required contrast and put it on a metal can with metallic paint. Guess what that looks like with a flash? Non-scannable. How do you educate people about how these codes work? It's not necessarily as obvious. I could do it in a humorous way here, but there's lots of education that goes along with it. So there's lots of different things that could be done in this. I want to take the phishing example and build that out, and then I'll end my comments. Some of the codes that we've seen out there do things like, yeah, they might redirect you to another website, and that's bad. But some of them have also done some things that are on the borderline of malicious. My most famous story that's not terrible in terms of, it didn't kill anybody, but they put out a code. Someone just randomly put them out in one of the department stores. You scanned it, and it looks like nothing happened. What it really did, though, is it kicked off a 3 gigabyte PDF download in the background. Now, on your phone, unless you happen to notice that little thing, in the background, you don't know that it's there. But half an hour later, people were like, why is my phone dead, and why did I get a cutoff message from Verizon saying I exceeded my data package? All right, so a particularly annoying kind of thing like that can happen. What can a standards organization do about that? Create a mechanism where a service agency could, in the background, easily go and verify what that content looks like and where it's going to. Whether it's a direct code or an indirect code or any of the other types, there's lots that could be done to validate the efficacy of the content. Lots that can be done. We'd love to continue working with you to see those things get done. Thank you for your time and attention.